As mentioned, my name is Ljungqvist, and I'd like to today focus in my presentation on our clinical program for the phase 2B program that we are currently preparing, and hopefully we could start that sometime next year. But what we are doing is that we are working within immune oncology, and in our case, it's immune oncology with T-cell activation. So it's not any antibodies that we are working with. We are taking the naive T-cells in the immune system, and we are programming these T-cells to target specific cancer cells. And the target that we are giving the T-cells to find, that is the protein called RhoC. And this protein is very interesting because it's overexpressed in all cancer cells having a metastatic potential. And this characteristic is true for all metastatic cancer cells for any metastasizing cancer form. So basically, the treatment has a very broad potential indication, but we have focused on prostate cancer. And we could obviously discuss some other possibilities in cancer. And I would like to discuss and share with you why we have chosen prostate cancer for our phase 2B clinical trial. Now, prostate cancer is progressing and visualized here with the tumor volume and time on the other side. And a lot of development have been done in late-stage prostate cancer. We are working in the other end, early, very early stage of disease progression. What is happening is that the patients will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Some of them will be under active surveillance, but some of them, the clinician will say that they will have primary treatment, and most of the patients in Scandinavia at least will have surgery at this phase. Some will have radiation and a small part will have chemotherapy. Once the primary treatment have been completed, the patients will have active surveillance, but they will have no additional treatment for this period of time. This active surveillance will continue until they get a relapse measured by biochemical recurrence. At this time, the clinician will then decide whether they will go into radiotherapy, if they will go into hormone treatment, or sometimes chemotherapy. What we are trying to do is to see if we could block or reduce the number of patients that need to go into second-line treatment. So what we are doing is we are trying to prevent or reduce relapse in prostate cancer patients. So it's an adjuvant therapy that we are working with. So this idea, is that our own, or have we seen it discussed other places? And our reference to, earlier this year, we had a scientific advice procedure with EMA, and we got a number of good advice, proposals, confirmation of what we were doing. And one of the things that EMA confirmed is what I've written in red here. There is a clear window to treat with RV001 between radical prostatectomy and biochemical recurrence. And that's exactly what we want to do. This summer, in July, FDA invited for a workshop. And the purpose of this workshop was to discuss treatment of localized prostate cancer, specifically early stage. And basically, FDA was also looking at even an earlier treatment options, but our phase of treatment was also part of that discussion. A lot of good information came out from the key opinion leaders and the staff from FDA. And here on this slide, I've just highlighted 4 comments that I think is interesting for the decision that we are taking for the prostate cancer development. And first of all, they say that high-risk and medium-risk patients should be offered treatment instead of active surveillance. So they agree that these patients should be treated. You should not just wait and see what happens. Secondly, they also identify that there is unmet need for these patients basically there are no treatments for these patients on the market currently. And thirdly, and that's important, treatment for this patient population must be safe and well tolerated in context of active surveillance. So what's important here is that you cannot treat with anti-cancer drugs that could have severe side effects. You have to compare it with the quality of life that these patients have under active surveillance. And the treatment must therefore not adversely react their quality of life in this period. And we believe that our product is suited and fulfills those requirements. Finally, one comment also from the FDA. They know that it's very difficult to develop treatment in this patient population, and that's because the endpoints that is currently defined in regulatory guidelines is not suitable for this patient population. If you, for example, use disease-free survival, which is the only approved endpoint in adjuvant treatment currently by EMA, you will need at least 5,300 patients, and the clinical phase will be on 7.5 years. And the authorities obviously agree that that's not doable. Here, FDA had come up with a proposal of an endpoint that they feel is relevant. And the endpoint is delayed or avoidance of morbidity from other treatments have a short or long-term toxicity is a relevant endpoint. And that is basically exactly what we are trying to do with our treatment. That is to delay or avoid morbidity from other treatments. So based on this, we are then planning for a phase 2b study in prostate cancer patients that have had prostatectomy. In this patient population, we can define a subpopulation that have a higher risk of recurrence, biochemical recurrence. We can define a population where it's known that 50% of these patients will have biochemical recurrence within 12 to 24 months. And based on that, we can define the number of patients that we need, and we can conduct the trial over a 3-year period. We will use 12 months, for the inclusion of the patients, and we use about 8 months for treatment and additional 16 months for follow-up. And with that period, we would be able to show a significant effect of the treatment. The primary endpoint will be biochemical recurrence, and we will have some secondary endpoints, and they are still discussed with key opinion leaders and with relevant regulatory authorities. So, is the drug that we are proposing to treat these patient populations with, is it safe? Yes, we believe we can conclude that from the results of our phase 1/2b study that has just been completed. This was also a study in prostatectomized patients. We had 22 patients enrolled in the study. It took 3 months to enroll the patients. Safety and tolerability was primary objectives of the study. We also looked at the immunological response, and finally, we looked at some explorative endpoints. Patients here are treated with 11 injections of our product, and it takes about 30 weeks for the total treatment. So if we looked at the result, the primary objective, safety and tolerability, the requirement was that only 1/3 of the patients should have grade 3, 4, or 5 toxicity, and it turned out that none of the patients had any 3, 4, or 5 toxicity. So the safety looks very, very good in the treatment with this product. The tolerability, we had a very good compliance to treatment, and 21 of the 22 patients completed the trial, and the one patient that didn't was not any safety or treatment-related reasons. What it was, that was personal reasons, that he did not want to continue, or his family did not want him to continue. However, the patient continued monitoring. So all samples, follow-up, has been taken on this patient, and is still included in the follow-up phase of the trial. There were some injection site reactions, but these were mild, less or equal to 2, and all of these reactions are reversible. So again, very good tolerability. The immune response, I have presented those data before, so I'll just repeat that 18 of 21 patients, 86%, had a confirmed immune response. The response is extremely robust, and by any standards, it's a very, very, very strong immune response. Experts within the field worldwide who have looked at them are very impressed with the results that we have obtained here. Then the explorative endpoints. Changes from baseline in the PSA, and there was no patients that experienced a biochemical relapse over the treatment period. 20 of the 22 patients had non-measurable PSA at inclusion, at baseline, and they did not have an immeasurable PSA when the treatment was completed. 2 of the patients had measurable PSA, but their PSA level was kept at the same level at the end of the treatment period. We then looked if we could have any correlation or association between PSA and the immunological response. But as only 2 of the patients had measurable PSA, we could actually not evaluate this parameter. It was expected. It's more a way of presenting data. Progression-free survival and overall survival. 2 of the patients enrolled, as I mentioned, had PSA, measurable PSA at inclusion. And 1 of these patients was classified as in progression when he entered the study. And he changed progression status to stable during the study. And that's obviously positive, but it's 1 patient and we can really not conclude anything based on that. And as we only had 2 patients, we cannot conclude anything in relation to progression-free survival. And as all patients enrolled are still alive, we can obviously not conclude anything of overall survival. But it's a good result. So on this background, we want to enter this phase 2b study. And we can start the study in first half of 2019. We are preparing for submission of the clinical trial application late this year. And we are applying for a pre-IND meeting with the FDA late December, planned to take place in February next year. At the same time, we are continuing our collaboration with the Lund University and also with the University in Tübingen and with the Center for Cancer Immune Therapy at the University Hospital Herlev in Copenhagen. I mentioned also earlier and in our rights issue that we are focusing on business development. It's the business model that we would like to sell, license the whole or part of the company after we have completed this study. So it's now that this development has started. In addition to our internal BD resources, we have signed a contract with Coltman Consultant, who we have a good collaboration with. Coltman has a very good track record in deal making within life science. So what we do is that we identify potential partners, and we have an ongoing communication with these identified partners. So information are evaluated, we get questions, we give answers, and conclusions comes up, and we come to the next step of discussions. We are not in a stage right now that we can say that we have a deal, close to a deal, or a lead, and I cannot comment on it if you asked, but we are not at that point at this time. We will be at BioEurope in the beginning of next month and have some meetings there. So just some financial information. We are traded on Spotlight. The ticker is RhoVac. Date of listing was 9th of March 2016. Listed at a price of 8.30 Swedish. And the price as of Friday closing was 38.6 Swedish. Market cap the same day, 367 million Swedish kronor. We have an average turnover per day of approximately 3 million Swedish kronor, which indicates a very good liquidity. And if you take the 12-month period, the share price have increased with close to 600% over the 12-month period. So with this, thank you very much.
always something with the technology. Okay, given my first spontaneous question, and given the graph you just showed us, 600% value increase over. What's the main reason someone should invest at this point?
The main reason to invest at this point will obviously be that we hope to be able to deliver good phase 2 clinical results. We hope to get a partner in that could also obviously have a positive impact of the share price. I'm not sure that we can create 600% increase from where we are now and 12 months ahead. But I feel confident that we could increase the value of the company considerable going forward.
And these business development processes, partnering processes, can take longer time than you expect, of course. But given that you're going into phase 2 studies, what kind of data would you need to show to really attract a buyer then?
It's difficult to say precisely which data, but obviously, and this is the feedback that we are getting, some potential partners are impressed about the results, especially the immune results that we have achieved. But at least the bigger players, they want to see phase 2b data. They want to see the efficacy. What we have shown is biological activity, and that needs to be translated to clinical efficacy. That's what they are looking for. So I think, and many of them, not most, but many of the companies are saying they really would like to see phase 2b data. So that's the trigger, I think. I think still with the discussions that we have with some companies, some may come in before we have phase 2b data. But again, as you say, M&A processes are very lengthy, and it's very difficult to set time limits on these processes.
And it's ironic that that's the thing that you can't really talk about. I actually got an email just 5 minutes ago from a reader of ours saying that, can you ask Anders which companies are more interested? And yeah, I can ask you.
You can ask you, but I will not answer you.
You will not answer, okay.
You know, if it's a positive, negative, it's a good company, it's not a good company, whatever I answer, it will be, could affect the share value. So I can't answer.
But then going forward in the process, and this, like you said, change in attitude from FDA, and you said that it was a perfect match then, the new endpoints is suggested. How could that facilitate for you going forward?
It will facilitate in the way that if we had disease-free survival, which is the only endpoint that today is approved by EMA, FDA also had metastasis-free survivals, which is slightly easier to work with in this period. But with this endpoint, basically is very similar as biochemical recurrence. So with that endpoint, we could show efficacy and regulatory approvable efficacy with approximately 200 patients in a placebo-controlled study. And the study will, as I mentioned, take 3 years instead of 7.5 years with 5,300 patients. So it's a tremendous change in the possibility to conduct clinical development in this patient population.
Quite a difference. Anders, I'm short for time, so that will be my last question. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.